Hello and welcome to this episode of Ask the YAs. In this episode, our young ambassadors are going to share the 10 most important things that they think parents should know about mental health to better equip them to support their young people when they're struggling.
So, one thing I wish that my parents knew about mental health when I was growing up is that when I want to speak about my mental health, I may want to speak to another trusted adult in my life um, that isn't you. However, this doesn't mean that I don't trust you. I think it's quite easy, especially as a parent, to think, oh, my children aren't coming to me with things that they want to talk about. Does that mean that they don't trust me or that they don't think they're comfortable enough talking to me? And that's not always what it is. Like I trust my parents a lot, but sometimes it's just easier to talk to someone else, and they also might have more information. So it might not be that I don't trust you, it's just that this person might be more equipped and have more knowledge on what I'm trying to talk to them about. So it makes more sense for me to go to them because I know that they're going to help me a little bit more, but it doesn't mean that I don't trust you and that I'm not comfortable talking to you.
That I wish my parents knew about mental health is that it's not their fault. I know that me personally, with my experience, my parents had a tendency to blame themselves for what I was experiencing, and this is something that people around me have also experienced when in reality it's not their fault. Mental health isn't really something that you can choose, you can't turn it on and off. And I know for me personally, my parents had nothing to do with what I was struggling with. It made things difficult to think that they were blaming themselves for what I was going through because in reality they couldn't do anything to stop what I was experiencing. And just having their support is actually a lot more than what I could ask for.
So at some point, a young person might confide in you and tell you that they have been struggling with their mental health. But it's important to realize that they might have been struggling for a while. It might not just be a new thing. In these circumstances, it's completely understandable and justified for you to feel a bit worried or a bit upset, as to why they haven't told you about this before. But it's very important to understand that struggling with your mental health is an incredibly personal thing for many young people. A lot of people find it difficult to talk about their emotions and express how they're feeling in words. It can be very difficult. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-awareness to realize that, I am struggling with my mental health and I do need some help and support. So if someone does confide in you, just try and be very patient and very supportive and understanding. You might not fully understand what they are going through and they might not themselves, but just showing them that you are there to support them through this process can be incredibly helpful for their well-being and their self-esteem.
Something young people want their parents to know about mental health is that there's a lot of stigma around it where people think that you can just snap out of it. And although that the young people probably recognise that their parents just want to do right by them and do what's best for them, sometimes it's hard to make the right choices if you've never been in the situations or if you don't fully understand it. So pushing someone to just snap out of it or just ignore the fact that it's going on and try and keep up at the same pace as their peers, it can be harmful or damaging, and it's not always the best road to go down. Sometimes it's easier to be understanding that it may take them longer and there's no hurry to get better right away.
Just because I'm a young person doesn't mean that I don't have any problems or stress.
So another thing that I wish my parents knew about mental health and my mental health when I was growing up is that it's not that sometimes I don't want to talk to you about it and I don't want to talk about it. It might be that I don't know how to talk about it or how to find the words to talk about it. There's a lot of change and confusion and overwhelmingness when you're growing up, especially when you're going through puberty and you're in secondary school, and it's a very different time of your life and you haven't really experienced stuff like that yet. And I think as we grow up and getting into adulthood, it's quite easy to forget what it was like back then and how it felt and how just confusing it is. And so trying to go through all of that as well as maybe then trying to understand your mental health, you might not yet have the words to describe it, or you're not quite sure what the problem really is, so you don't want to talk about it because you don't have the words to do it, and it just gets very confusing. And often you're getting frustrated because when you do try to speak about it, you just can't find the words, or you just can't work out what you're trying to say or what you're trying to tell people. So sometimes it's not that I don't want to speak, it's just that I don't know how to speak about it quite yet, because I'm still learning, as well as probably you were. So yeah, that's another thing that I wish that my parents knew.
Something that I wish parents in general know about mental health is that it is not something that we can control, especially in regards to timings. I know that occasionally panic attacks or depressive moods, that sort of thing, can occur at inconvenient times, but making us feel bad about it isn't something that is, you know, going to help the situation. Bearing in mind, we can't control when we're going to experience issues with our mental health. We can't stop it when it's happening, and making us kind of feel bad about it or trying to belittle the issues isn't going to help kind of get through it. It doesn't help. So it's really important to know that it's not something that can be time controlled, and instead just supporting, helping, even just talking is a much better way.
Something young people wish their parents knew about mental health would be that it's not the child's job to educate the parent on mental health. And although it's really beneficial to ask questions and understand the young person's perspective, it's not always beneficial to rely on them to teach you about it, because they may not know themselves, they might not know enough about it, or they may not feel comfortable discussing it with you, they might not be in that place yet. And it's a lot of responsibility to place on a young person when not every person with mental health needs to be an advocate for it. And sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to come to terms with it, or a little bit longer to learn about it, and all that responsibility, although it can be beneficial, if it's at the wrong time, it can become detrimental.
So I think one thing that's really important to understand when it comes to mental health is that there is no quick fix. You know, there's no one solution that fits to all and applies to all. So perhaps saying things like, oh, it's just a phase, get over it, or just snap out of it, and giving someone ultimatums to try and get over their mental health issues is really not helpful, because sometimes the young person might feel trapped and that makes them feel even more helpless. It's important to understand that mental health illnesses are perhaps a lot more complicated, and they take a lot of time and patience to come to terms with the fact that you might be struggling and you do need some help and support. So in these circumstances, the best thing you could do is have a supportive and well-informed conversation with that young person to show them that, you know, they are not alone, they have your support, and they're going to get through this together with you. And those kind of conversations can help a young person a lot more than you probably realise.
One thing I'd really like parents to know about young people's mental health is that it's completely normal and natural for your young person to need to seek support from people other than you for their mental health. That might be their friends, other family members, or professionals. It's completely normal and natural for this to happen, and the best thing that you can do is to support your young person to get the support they need from whoever it is that they need it from. The most important thing you can do to support your young person's mental health is to listen to them.